So I don't want all of this information. I only want basically the bus stops. That one there, that one there, that one there, that one there, and so on. I just want to pull that information out from all of this information here so that I can play with it and pass that to another API and get further information. So let's go back. What I need to do now is create a function. I'm going to call it get the @code, which is the code that I'm looking for, and I'm going to be using the bounds. So really what I'm trying to do here is say I need the code from the bounds. That's how I've named my function. You can name it whatever you want really, but I'm just trying to be sort of logical. It doesn't always work. And I also need to sort of pass in the address. I need the address because at the moment I haven't got anything which actually calls the address. I should be doing that shortly. This is going to be inside this function. So we need the address. Okay, so what I really need to do is create a dictionary. So if I call my dictionary after what it really is, @code, and set that to nothing, so at the end of the day, what I'm asking it to do is create a dictionary of stops. So for all the stops in that area, so if we take a look back here, all the stops that are located in this area, there'll be a dictionary for. Actually, I think there's a few more stops there. If I zoom in a little bit, maybe, yeah, I thought so. We can see that actually we've got 4 stops in that location. So I'm going to create a dictionary which is going to hold each one of those 4 stops and some information about it. Now, as we did before when we played with results, we're going to have stops and then we're going to have more than one item. And if you recall, when we took a look at the data that was being returned, which one? Let's go to the Google one. Here we go. When we took a look at the data returned, we got one key field, which I'm going to call stops, and then I'm going to have an array indicated by square brackets of the 4 or 5 stops that we saw. So I need to have an array or a list to hold that sort of information. So place list, I could have called it stop list or something, and I'm going to set that to be empty as well. So I'm going to clear it out. It's important that we start with empty ones because lists and dictionaries can act in a global fashion and retain information which would sort of destroy what we're trying to do. So we're clearing them out to begin with. The next thing I want to do is find out, well, how many bus stops did it return? It could be 0, it could be 20. I've already mentioned 4. I did that by visual inspection. There's 4. If I go back to the shell, if we take a look down here at total, it's got another field called total, which tells me how many stops were available, and that tells me that there were 4 stops available. So I want to pick that information up because I just want to sort of run through a loop for each one of these. So I'm going to do it 4 times. So going back to my program, I'm going to need something called total items, and I'm going to set that to 0. So if when I finish running through my loop this value is still 0, I know that there are no bus stops within that location. So when I performed this, I didn't really care. It could have come back with nothing, which would have crashed the program. And I don't want that to happen. I actually want to handle any errors that come up. So if there are no stops and there's no bounds, then I want to be able to handle that information and give the user a choice based on it. So I'm going to enclose this call here in a try except block. So there's my try. Let's grab hold of this. because I want to do exactly the same call that I did so I can get that data. And because I've called this address here, I just want to pass in address. I don't want to do the function. I'm going to be calling that elsewhere. So that's now going to get or trying to get the number of bus stops in a location. And if it does, then I know now that I can set total items to that value. So that would be a result. And if we recall, it was called total. So if I pull that result total, that should give me the value 4 in this case, I think it is. But if I'm successful, I'm going to know how many bus stops to play with. So let's handle what happens if I am not successful, if there's some sort of problem, there's no bus stops to be returned. So all I want to do really is print a message out to the user to say we have a problem. Let's put a new line in there. I'm going to write quite a lengthy statement. The address appears to be nonsense. So in other words, if I'd have typed in blah 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 for the address, it's obviously going to come back with no results, and that's going to tell me that we've got a nonsense address, or maybe there's nothing in the bounds, or so I just do another new line, and right, nothing appears within the bounds. Not a very good message, but we can tidy that up later. But essentially what we've either got a result with some data with this, or we've got something that it is just nonsense. Let me see if I can reproduce that error. So if I run this program again, hopefully it's not going to crash. And if I type in blah 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 for my address, it's coming back with some sort of message. It's telling me that there's no stops. I've got no stops whatsoever, but it's still found latitudes and longitudes. A bit strange. Try it with some numbers. Let's see what happens there. That should be nonsense enough for it. Ooh, that would be very big nonsense. I still return some data, so it's attempting to get some data, but I need to pick that up. The nice thing is it's telling me that the total is 0, so I could have used that. So I've handled that, not very well, but it will work just in case I haven't catered for anything. So let's now handle what happens if I do have bus stops. So if total items is greater than 0, because I set it to 0 there, so it can only get to this point if 0 if nothing was returned. We could have picked it up from there as well. If the total number of items is 0, it is greater than 0, then what we need to do is I want to put those into my list and eventually into my dictionary. So I'm going to run through all of those items. So for item in range, total items. Okay, so I'm going to run through each one of my items. I'm going to set a temporary dictionary each time. So I'm setting my temporary dictionary to empty, and I'm going to populate my temporary dictionary, and when my temporary dictionary's got data in, then I'm going to put that into the array. So what I'm looking at here, if we go back to this one, I'm setting up a temporary dictionary with values in that dictionary, and when I finish populating that for each stop, then I'm going to put that into my array. So I'm going to start off with an empty dictionary every time, and so I'm now going to populate it, my dictionary, and I'm going to have a field called, or a key called @code, and that is going to be equal to, now we need to take a look at the data we got back. Now maybe the data we got back isn't very easy to see. Let's see if I can let's just comment that out so it doesn't crash for the time being. I'm going to print out the address, and I'm going to use another website to have a look at the information that we get back. So okay, print result. Let's see if I can go from print result. Let's try that. Let's go back to the shell. I'm going to copy all of this information, and I'm going to go to a JSON formatter and validator. There we go. And I'm going to paste that into there so that we can see what happens. Process that information. Ignore the errors. But this sort of gives us our arrays easier to see, because I got the information back. There's no schema on the websites or anything else like that, so I'm just sort of trying to create my own schema. So in the results that I got back, I've got this. I've got an RPP, a maxlon, a minlon, a searchlon, a stops, which is an array of bearing, indicator, SMS code name, locality, longitude, mode, latitude, ATCO code, stop, and so on. And it repeats because we've got several items, which is roughly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to recreate this, but with only the ATCO code. But the important aspect is I've got an array. So if I go back to my program, so my dictionary ATCO code equals the results, which is what I got back. Let's get rid of that. If you remember, we had result here. Okay, make sure it's called the same. Result. Now if I go and take a look at my JSON formatter, it was called stops. Okay, so this is results, but I want to pick up the stops with all this information in here. So if I go back to there, so I can pick up stops. Now I need to loop through this array. I'm going to be going 0, 1, 2, 3, up to total items 4. So it's going to do it 4 times. That's 0 to 3 in this instant. So I need to put an index in there, which would be item, as it's going through each time. So it's going to loop through each one of these. That's 0. That's 1. That's 2. That's 3. So there's my 4 items. I shouldn't have another one after that. I come back to just the outer layer. There's the end of that array. So I'm looping through each of these items. And what I want to pull out from there is the ATCO code. So I am now pulling out, let's go back to the JSON formatter. I'm pulling out this value here, the ATCO code for each one. So I'm making up a dictionary just consisting of the ATCO codes. So that's got the information that I want, but now I need to create my own list of it. So what I'm going to do is append that to my list. So place list dot append my dict. So each time I go through, I'm going to pick up an ATCO code. It's going to be a dictionary on its own, and I'm going to end up with a list of dictionaries. And so that's pulled through on that one. So the last thing I really need to do is create my own dictionary, my ATCO code, with its own sort of top level item called stops. You can call it whatever you want. It's your own. And what that's going to be is the place list. So what I'm doing basically is I've created my own top level one called stops, and the array inside is called place list. So it's going to put all of those places, which just is the ATCO code from each one of those. So basically all I've done is just removed everything from here. So it's just got the ATCO code. Oh, that took quite a bit of explaining. And the last thing I'm going to do is return that back to the calling program. Return a call-in function, return the ATCO code. Might be a nice idea to actually test this out shortly. So we'll save that and stop the video here, and we'll test that as we go on.